All right, so get this. We've got staffers.
Spaffers.
Yeah, staffers from an organization called DOGE. DOGE. Yeah, and they're showing up at the USIP headquarters.
Oh, wow.
With a police escort.
No way.
Yeah, on a Monday night. It's like something straight out of a political thriller.
It really sounded like a scene from House of Cards, huh?
Right.
But this is real.
This was real. This was a real standoff with really high stakes, and it gets even more intriguing.
Oh, yeah.
When you consider this DOGE group might be connected to...
With?
Wait for it, Elon Musk.
Really?
Yeah, we'll unpack that a bit later. But first, for those of you who might need a refresher, the U.S. Institute of Peace. USIP exactly is a nonpartisan organization focused on preventing violent conflicts and promoting peace worldwide.
Makes sense.
It was founded by Congress back in 1984.
Wow, so it's been around for a while.
Yeah, and it's always been considered independent.
Until recently?
Until recently. And this incident really throws a wrench into things, and it all started with President Trump's executive order.
In February.
Yeah, in February, aimed at streamlining government operations and cutting costs.
Okay.
USIP, along with other federal advisory committees, got caught in the crosshairs.
Interesting.
What's interesting is that the administration argued that USIP wasn't complying with the order and accused them of being inefficient and resistant to accountability.
And that's where things get really complicated. Why this particular approach? Were there specific criticisms of USIP's performance, or was something else going on?
That's a great question, and it seems like USIP had a very different perspective.
Okay.
They saw this as a blatant power grab by the executive branch, a violation of their autonomy.
So they're saying their independence is vital for their effectiveness?
Right.
Being free from political influence, they say, allows them to pursue their mission with integrity and neutrality.
Makes sense, but if we rewind back to that Monday night standoff, things got pretty heated. DOGE staff were initially refused entry. And then former USIP President George Moose allegedly denied access to Kenneth Jackson, the new acting president appointed by the remaining USIP board.
Oh, so that's when the police were called in.
Yeah, it's when the police were called in, yeah.
What a scene.
Right. MPD officers escorting Jackson into the building while DOGE claimed Moose was acting unlawfully, but no arrests were made.
That's interesting.
And adding fuel to the fire, we have Congressman Don Beyer.
Oh, yeah.
Who actually witnessed the whole thing, calling it a break-in.
Wow.
And vowing to fight what he called an illegal power grab.
So we've got the Trump administration pushing for efficiency and accountability, USIP defending its independence, and Congressman Beyer jumping into the fray. What a mess.
A mess with potentially huge consequences. This isn't just some internal squabble. What happens to USIP could have ripple effects for other federally funded yet independent organizations.
Absolutely. This whole incident raises questions about the future of USIP, the balance of power within our government, and even the potential erosion of checks and balances.
Wow, so we got a lot to unpack here, but before we dive into the deeper implications, let's go back and break down the roles of the key players in this drama, starting with that mysterious DOGE group.
Okay.
What exactly is their deal, and are they really connected to Elon Musk?
That's a good place to start, DOGE, or the Digital Oversight and Government Efficiency Task Force.
Okay.
Was created by the executive order to, as they put it, integrate USIP into broader efficiency initiatives. Now, the connection to Elon Musk is more speculative.
Right.
The name is obviously a nod to the Dogecoin cryptocurrency, which Musk has famously promoted.
So maybe a bit of a troll move by the administration.
It's certainly possible, but what's important is DOGE's function. They were tasked with implementing the executive order's directives regarding USIP and ensuring compliance.
And that's what led them to USIP's doorstep that Monday night.
Exactly. And their presence there alongside the police really escalated the situation and brought the conflict to a head.
Okay, so we've got DOGE, the enforcers.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about George Moose, the ousted president of USIP. He seems like a pretty important figure in this whole story.
He certainly is. Moose is a career diplomat with a long history of working in conflict zones and promoting peace. He served as a U.S. ambassador to several countries and held senior positions at the State Department.
So not just some random bureaucrat. He's a heavyweight in the world of diplomacy.
Absolutely. And his removal from USIP just days before this standoff raises a lot of questions.
It does seem strange that the administration would remove someone with his experience, especially if their goal was to improve USIP's effectiveness.
It does raise questions about their true motivations. Was it really about efficiency, or was something else going on?
Maybe they felt Moose would be too resistant to their changes?
That's certainly a possibility. And it highlights a key tension at the heart of this whole situation, the need for accountability versus the importance of independence.
Because if USIP becomes just another arm of the executive branch, can it really be an effective peacemaker?
That's the argument USIP and its supporters are making. They say true neutrality is essential for building trust and credibility in conflict zones.
So how do we square that with the administration's desire for greater control and oversight? Is there a middle ground here?
That's the challenge, and it's not unique to USIP. Many federally funded organizations grapple with balancing accountability to the government with the need for independence to fulfill their missions.
What are some potential solutions? How have other organizations navigated this tension?
Well, one common approach is to establish a board or advisory committee with diverse representation, including members from different branches of government, as well as experts from outside the government.
Okay.
This can create a system of checks and balances, ensuring that no single entity has too much influence.
That makes sense, sort of like a built-in system to guard against overreach from any one group?
Exactly. Another key element is transparency. Organizations can be required to publicly disclose their funding sources, spending activities, and performance metrics.
So even though they might be independent in their decision-making, they're still accountable to the public.
Right. And to maintain trust, it's crucial to have clear guidelines and procedures for handling potential conflicts of interest.
All of this sounds like a complex balancing act?
It is, and it requires careful consideration of the specific organization, its goals, and the context in which it operates. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Let's bring this back to the USIP situation. What are the potential outcomes here? Could they lose their independence entirely?
It's certainly a possibility. If the administration prevails, USIP could be absorbed into the executive branch, becoming just another government agency.
That would be a dramatic shift. What would be the implications of that?
Well, critics argue that it would severely damage USIP's credibility and effectiveness. If they're seen as simply an arm of the U.S. government, their ability to act as a neutral peacemaker would be compromised.
Countries and groups in conflict might be less likely to trust them.
Exactly. They might see USIP as pushing a U.S. agenda rather than working for genuine peace and reconciliation.
What are some other potential outcomes? Is there any chance of a compromise?
A compromise is certainly possible. Perhaps a structure could be created that allows for more oversight and accountability without completely stripping USIP of its autonomy.
A middle ground of some sort.
Yes. It might involve restructuring the board, establishing clearer reporting requirements, or implementing new conflict of interest policies.
So a lot of this might hinge on the legal challenges that are likely to arise.
Absolutely. There are several potential legal battles brewing. First, the legality of the executive order itself could be challenged. Some legal experts argue it exceeds the president's authority, especially when it comes to an organization created by Congress like USIP.
So a potential showdown between the executive and legislative branches.
Exactly. Then there's the question of the firings of Moose and the USIP board members. Were those actions lawful? Could they be successfully challenged in court?
And let's not forget Congressman Beyer. He seems determined to fight this.
He's made it clear he sees this as an illegal power grab and plans to use his position in Congress to push back against the administration's actions.
So we could see congressional hearings, investigations, maybe even attempts to pass legislation that clarifies USIP's status and protects its independence?
It's all on the table. This story is far from over, and the legal and political battles could drag on for quite some time.
All this over an organization dedicated to peace? Seems ironic.
It does highlight the complexities and contradictions inherent in power dynamics, even when the goal is something as universally valued as peace.
Okay, so we've got this web of potential outcomes, legal challenges, and political maneuvering. But let's step back for a moment and talk about the human element of this story. These aren't just abstract concepts we're dealing with. There are real people whose lives and careers are being impacted by all of this.
You're absolutely right. It's easy to get lost in the legal and political debates, but it's important to remember the individuals at the center of this drama.
Let's start with George Moose. What kind of impact has this had on him? He dedicated his career to USIP.
It must be incredibly difficult for him to see the organization he led for so long embroiled in this controversy, and to be ousted in such a sudden and public manner. It's a blow to his legacy, no doubt.
And what about Kenneth Jackson, the new acting president? He's stepping into a very challenging situation.
Imagine the pressure he must be under. He's tasked with implementing these controversial changes, navigating a hostile work environment, and trying to lead an organization in turmoil, all while facing scrutiny and criticism from those who question his qualifications.
He's walking a tightrope, for sure. And then we have Congressman Beyer, who's putting himself on the line challenging the administration's actions.
Beyer's decision to speak out so forcefully is notable. He's risking political capital to defend USIP's independence, which suggests he sees this as a matter of principle, not just political opportunism.
It takes courage to stand up for what you believe in, especially when you're going against powerful forces.
Absolutely. And Beyer's actions could inspire others to join the fight to hold the administration accountable and to defend the principles of democracy and the rule of law.
So we've got these three individuals, each with their own motivations and perspectives, caught in the crossfire of this power struggle. It's a reminder that these abstract political battles have very real human consequences.
And it underscores the importance of individual action and the potential for individuals to make a difference, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds.
It's easy to feel powerless when you see these massive institutions clashing, but ultimately it's the actions of individuals that shape the course of events.
Well said. Now, shifting gears a bit, let's delve deeper into the specific arguments being made by both sides. We've touched on them broadly, but I think it's worth examining them in more detail.
Great idea. Let's start with the Trump administration's perspective. They've been very vocal about their reasons for targeting USIP and other federal advisory committees.
Their main argument revolves around efficiency. They claim these committees are often bloated, redundant, and inefficient. They argue that taxpayers are footing the bill for unnecessary bureaucracy, and streamlining these committees is essential for responsible use of government funds.
And they've used some pretty strong language to describe those who oppose their efforts, terms like rogue bureaucrats and entrenched interests.
Which is a way of framing the opposition as self-serving and out of touch with the needs of the American people.
Yeah.
It's a powerful rhetorical tactic, but it's important to examine the evidence behind their claims.
So what evidence do they offer to support their assertions of inefficiency?
That's where things get a bit murky. While they've made broad pronouncements about waste and inefficiency, they haven't really provided concrete examples or data to back up their claims.
So more of a general accusation than a detailed analysis.
Exactly. And that's something critics have seized upon. They argue that the administration is using the rhetoric of efficiency as a cover for a power grab, a way to consolidate control within the executive branch.
So it boils down to a question of motivation. Is this truly about making government more efficient, or is it about something else entirely? Maybe they see USIP as a threat to their foreign policy agenda.
That's a possibility worth considering. If USIP is operating independently, pursuing its own peacebuilding initiatives, it could potentially undermine or contradict the administration's foreign policy goals.
That raises an interesting question. What evidence is there to support that claim? Have there been specific instances where USIP's actions have clashed with the administration's policies?
That's something that would require further investigation. It's worth looking into USIP's past activities, their relationships with various governments and organizations, and whether there have been any public disagreements or conflicts with the administration.
It's a good reminder that we shouldn't just accept these claims at face value. We need to dig deeper, examine the evidence, and consider all possible motivations.
Absolutely. Critical thinking is essential in a situation like this where there are strong opinions and potentially hidden agendas on both sides.
Let's shift gears now and look at the arguments being made by those who support USIP's independence. They seem to be focusing on two key points.
The first is the inherent value of independence itself. They argue that organizations like USIP are most effective when they are free from political interference.
The idea being that if they're seen as an arm of the executive branch, their credibility and neutrality would be undermined.
Precisely. They wouldn't be seen as an honest broker in conflict resolution, and their ability to work effectively with diverse stakeholders would be compromised.
And the second point they emphasize is USIP's track record. They argue that their long history of working to prevent and resolve conflicts around the world, often in very challenging situations, is a testament to the effectiveness of their independent approach.
They're essentially saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They argue that the administration's attempts to fix USIP by bringing it under tighter control could backfire, making it less effective in carrying out its mission.
But wouldn't more oversight and accountability make them more efficient?
That's the argument the administration is pushing. But USIP supporters counter that true effectiveness in peacebuilding requires flexibility, adaptability, and the ability to act quickly and decisively. They argue that too much bureaucratic oversight could stifle their ability to respond effectively to rapidly evolving situations.
So it's a trade-off between efficiency and effectiveness.
Exactly. And it's a trade-off that's not easily resolved. It requires careful consideration of the specific context and the goals of the organization.
It seems like both sides are making valid points. How do we weigh those points and decide which side has the stronger argument?
That's where critical thinking and informed judgment come in. You have to consider the evidence, the potential biases of each side, the historical context, and the potential consequences of different outcomes.
So it's not a simple answer. It requires a deeper analysis and a willingness to engage with the complexities of the situation.
Exactly. And that's what we're trying to do here today, to provide you with the information and the different perspectives you need to form your own informed opinion.
And speaking of perspectives, we haven't talked much about the perspective of the American people. How do they feel about this whole situation?
That's a great question. Public opinion is a crucial factor in any political battle. It would be interesting to see what polls and surveys reveal about public perceptions of USIP, the administration's actions, and the importance of its independence.
Maybe there's a disconnect between what the administration is doing and what the public actually wants.
It's certainly possible. Public opinion can be a powerful force for change, and if the administration senses that their actions are unpopular, they might be more willing to compromise or back down.
So this isn't just a battle between the administration and USIP, it's also a battle for public opinion.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important for people to stay informed, engage in thoughtful discussion, and make their voices heard.
It's a reminder that we as citizens have a role to play in shaping the future of our country and the values it stands for.
Well said. And that brings us back to the broader implications of this whole USIP saga. It's not just about one organization. It's about fundamental principles of democracy. Checks and balances, the rule of law, and the role of independent institutions in holding power accountable.
These are principles that affect all of us, regardless of our political leanings. If we allow them to be eroded, we all lose.
Exactly. And that's why this story matters. It's a microcosm of a larger struggle that's playing out in our country and around the world, a struggle between those who seek to consolidate power and those who believe in the importance of democratic institutions and individual liberties.
It's a struggle that's worth fighting for.
Absolutely. And that fight begins with awareness, understanding, and a willingness to engage in thoughtful dialogue.
It is a really unsettling question to consider what happens if organizations dedicated to peace can't function effectively. It makes you wonder if there's a deeper tension here beyond just efficiency versus independence.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point.
Yeah.
Perhaps this situation reveals a fundamental clash of ideologies about the role of the U.S. in global affairs.
Yeah.
On one side, you have those who believe in a more assertive, unilateral approach.
Okay.
Prioritizing American interests above all else.
And on the other side, you have those who see diplomacy and multilateralism as the most effective tools for promoting peace and stability.
Exactly. And USIP, with its focus on conflict prevention and peaceful resolution, might be seen as a symbol of that latter approach, an approach that might not sit well with those who favor a more hardline stance.
So in a way, this whole fight over USIP could be a proxy battle for a much larger debate about America's role in the world.
It's certainly possible, and that's why this story resonates so deeply. It touches upon these fundamental questions about who we are as a nation and what we stand for in the world.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. We started with what seemed like a simple power struggle over one organization.
Right.
But it's clear now that the implications go far beyond USIP.
It's a tangled web of political maneuvering, ideological clashes, and questions about the very foundations of our democracy.
And as we try to make sense of it all, I keep coming back to the human element. What happens to the dedicated individuals who work for USIP? What about the people and communities around the world who rely on their work?
It's crucial to remember that behind all the political rhetoric and legal wrangling are real people whose lives are being affected by this situation.
For some, it might mean losing their jobs, their livelihoods. For others, it might mean the loss of vital support and resources in conflict zones where peace is fragile.
The human cost of this conflict can't be ignored.
It makes you wonder if efficiency is always the most important factor. Are there times when other values like independence, integrity, and compassion should take precedence?
That's a question each of us has to grapple with as we weigh the different perspectives and potential outcomes of this situation. Is efficiency the ultimate goal, even if it comes at the expense of other values?
It's a tough question, and it's one that doesn't have an easy answer.
No, it doesn't. But it's a question that we as citizens need to engage with. We can't just sit back and let these decisions be made without our input.
So what can we do? How can we make a difference in a situation like this?
First and foremost, stay informed, read news articles, listen to podcasts like this one, engage in thoughtful discussions, and try to understand the different perspectives at play.
Knowledge is power, right?
Exactly. And once you're informed, make your voice heard, contact your elected officials, Write letters to the editor, share your thoughts on social media, and engage in constructive dialogue with others.
We might not be able to single-handedly change the course of events, but we can contribute to the conversation, raise awareness, and hold those in power accountable.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the power of collective action. When people come together, speak out, and demand change, they can make a real difference.
This deep dive has been a journey. We started with a mysterious standoff, uncovered a complex power struggle, and explored questions about the role of the U.S. in the world, the balance of power in our government, and the values that define us as a society.
And through it all, we've seen the human faces behind the headlines, reminding us that these political battles have real-world consequences for individuals and communities around the globe.
So as we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder: what kind of world do you want to live in? A world where efficiency reigns supreme, even at the expense of other values? Or a world where peace, justice, and compassion are prioritized?
The choice is ours. Let's choose wisely.
This has been The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey.